Chapter 5 Christmas with the Weasleys. The last day at Hogwarts went by, and they got on the train to go to Ron's house for Christmas break. Hermione refused to talk to Ron and spent most of the trip talking to Ginny. Ron only had Harry to talk to since he was avoiding his three brothers. He liked talking with Harry, but he wished Hermione was there too. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley came to the train station in their RV. They said hello to everyone as they walked to the parking lot and were especially happy to see Ginny and Hermione. As the 9 of them piled into the RV, Harry asked a question. "I thought the Weasleys don't have a lot of money. How do you still have this RV?" Mr. Weasley answered without hesitation. "We leased it." Ron sat down on the RV's couch and looked out the window. "Oh good, I thought you might have stolen it from an intersection or something." Mrs. Weasley gave Ron a disappointed glare. "We are not a family that steals. Besides, you were there when we got it." She walked over and made him empty his pockets. She took several bags of drugs and threw them out the window. Her angry glare turned to a friendly smile as she sat down at the table with Hermione, Ginny, and Harry. "It's so good to see all of you again." "It's good to see you as well," Harry announced as the RV pulled out of the parking lot of the train station. "I heard you've all been trying to get Ron to quit drugs," Mrs. Weasley said. "How's that been going?" "He overdosed the first night at Hogwarts and I was drugged." Mrs. Weasley gave a worried and surprised look as Harry added to the situation. "On the bright side, thanks to the protector of Hogwarts, he's cut back a lot." Mrs. Weasley looked relieved, but Hermione looked annoyed. "Wow, let's give Ron an award for committing a crime slightly less." They changed the conversation, but Hermione was still mad at Ron. They arrived at the Weasleys' home and went inside. Mrs. Weasley welcomed Harry. "We call our home the Burrow." Harry began to chuckle at the name. "That's brilliant." They went to unpack their things. Hermione slept in Ginny's room, and Harry slept in Ron's room. Harry only had school uniforms and a rock since he was brought directly to Hogwarts from his aunt and uncle's kidnapping jail. Ron's room was bright orange and the walls were covered with posters. Some had green leaves on them, while others had bowls of powdery substances. Ron took down a poster with a leaf on it and revealed a hole in the wall. Harry watched as Ron took bags of drugs out of the hidden compartment in his trunk and put them into the hole in the wall. He put the poster back up and inhaled the remainder of the last bag in the trunk. He threw the bag in the garbage and started unpacking his clothes. They were mostly hand-me-downs from his brothers. Harry sat with Rock, and Hedwig sat on his head. "Won't your parents notice if you show up to dinner high?" "Yes, if they notice. But they won't. I've figured out an amount and type of drug that makes me effectively asleep whenever I'm on vacation. I'm not high enough to act strange, but I won't remember any of this. Then, when the vacation is over, I can go back to my normal drugs." "Why do you hate your family so much?" Harry asked as Hedwig flew around with a sock in his mouth. Ron paused. "Because they're disappointed in me." "Then just stop disappointing them." "It's not that simple." Harry was about to challenge his answer, but instead decided to ask a different question. "How do you know how much to bring? And aren't you running low since your mum threw a few bags out the window?" "I have this down to an exact science. I know how much I need. This stash will last exactly until we get back to Hogwarts, and I knew Mum would check for drugs. She found some and stopped her search. The bags in my pockets didn't even have real drugs." With his questions answered, Harry changed the subject again. Hermione and Ginny unpacked in her small pink room. "You're still mad at Ron?" Ginny asked. "Of course I am! He shouldn't have drugged me! How could that thought even cross his mind?" "Harry told me he drugged one of your teachers." "Twice." "Yeah, but I'm his friend. You don't drug friends." "So what are you gonna do? Send a bunch of canaries to attack him?" "Maybe I will." Hermione crossed the room to look outside at the orchard and search for birds. Ginny rolled her eyes. "Do you really want to be mad at him for the rest of your life?" Hermione said nothing and kept looking out the window. Days passed and Hermione refused to talk to Ron. He tried apologizing by offering her some of his drugs, which only made her more angry. She didn't want to be mad at him anymore, and she really wanted to move on, but he made it so difficult. One morning, just after breakfast, Hermione decided to break the silence. "Ron, you've done a lot of stupid things. When I asked you to stay away from moaning Joanne, you didn't listen. That was mean, but this time you were even worse. After I finally accepted that you're my friend, you shoved a book in my face that was covered in drugs. Why would you do that to me? You could have just ignored me like all the times before." Her words echoed off the walls of the burrow, and everyone stared at Ron, waiting for his answer. They were all well aware of Hermione and Ron's conflict, and wondered what would come from them speaking again. Mrs. Weasley held a dish covered in soap, Mr. Weasley didn't dare move the newspaper, Percy stopped in the middle of flipping a page of his book, Fred and George stopped snickering, Ginny stopped petting Hedwig, and Harry got ready to intervene if necessary. "Well, I just wanted to go to the forest, but now I see how my actions really hurt your feelings, and I apologize. Next time, I will just ignore your wishes instead of drugging you, because friends before drugs." As soon as he finished talking, everyone's heads moved to look at Hermione. Her angry expression softened. She took her time in thinking over what he said. "Good enough," she said as she made a small smile and walked over to him. "I'm going to get you to quit." The day went by and Ron and Harry were in the front yard with Hedwig waiting for everyone else. The Weasleys came outside with several brooms and round rocks with handles on the tops. Harry and Ron followed as they walked to a frozen pond. It was a large pond with a few trees around the edges. Mrs. Weasley asked for shoe sizes and then handed out special shoes. "Are we going bowling?" Harry asked. "No," Mr. Weasley chuckled as he gave a broom to Harry. "Are we learning to fly?" Harry asked. Mrs. Weasley began sliding on the frozen pond with her broom. "No, we're going to play a game. It's called curling," Mr. Weasley said as the rocks were put on the ice. Ron groaned. "This is why I hate being home in the winter." Hermione stepped onto the ice. "We played last year. It was really fun." "What's curling?" Harry asked as everyone else got onto the ice. Mr. Weasley turned to Harry. "What's curling? It's only our favorite sport, just above hockey." "We play it every winter," Mrs. Weasley chimed. Her warm smile faded. "Ron used to love curling," she sighed. Hermione helped Harry onto the ice as some circles were drawn with the brooms. "The game is simple. Each team slides rocks to the house, which is this circle. The goal is to get your team's rocks into the house center, which is the inner circle right here." Ginny slid to Harry. "And the other teams try to knock your rocks out of the house center. It takes a lot of strategy." Percy continued to set up for the game. "We need teams of 3. The 9 of them split up into 3 teams. Percy, Fred, and George were Team Weasleys, No Weases. Mr. Weasley, Mrs. Weasley, and Ginny were Team Canada. Harry, Ron, and Hermione discussed the name. "How about Team Gryffindor?" Harry suggested. "We need a name that separates us from them," Ron objected. "All my family is from Gryffindor." Harry got another idea. "Mud can be our team captain since she played more recently than all of us. It should be named after her." "Team Granger?" Hermione asked. "No, Team Mud." "What's a Granger?" Harry asked. "Isn't that the thing baby Jesus slept in?" "Never mind. Ron, what do you think we should name our team?" "Team Pot." Harry looked at Ron. "Aw, you want to name the team after me? Mud, what do you think?" Hermione laughed. "Yeah, that's a good team name." "It's a better name than the boring Gryffindor Quidditch team," Harry said. "I forgot all about Squid Ditch," Hermione reminisced. "Oh yeah, me too," Harry said. "I never go to practice or any matches. They probably kicked me off the team." Harry learned more about curling from the Weasleys while Hermione and Ron stood back, waiting for them. Hermione chuckled at their team name. Ron glared at her suspiciously. "Did you find my super secret stash of drugs? You're usually really sarcastic and violent," Ron said. "No, I just really like being here. My family is nothing like this. I wish they were." Hermione looked up at the blue sky. "Why did you start doing drugs?" Ron didn't answer. They began the game and Harry caught on quickly. Curling is a no-contact sport and it's very calm. Each team quietly discussed their strategy. Harry was the only one who cared about winning, and Team Pot was in the lead. As the other teams delivered their rocks, Hermione, Ron, and Harry stood under a snow-weighted tree waiting for their next turn. "Why did Ginny and Mr. and Mrs. Weasley name their team Team Canada?" Hermione asked. "Our ancestors are from Canada, and curling is a big thing there," Ron answered. Harry nodded, but Hermione looked confused. "How do you have ancestors in Canada? That's not possible. If I was making that up, then why would they be Team Canada?" Harry thought about it. "I know! Your ancestors immigrated to Canada and then moved back to England." "But that would still make his ancestors European. They just lived in Canada for a while." "You just wish you were Canadian too," Ron said. "Canadian isn't a race!" Harry crossed his arms and looked at Hermione. "Mud, for the last time, we will not tolerate your racism." Hermione kept her mouth shut since they would never understand. The game went on and Hermione, Ron, and Harry won. Harry thought he saw Ron smile as they were named the winners. He thought about the game and wondered if he was actually having fun. They continued to partake in family traditions, and Ron put up with the activities. Harry didn't really care for them, but the rest of the Weasleys and Hermione got into the Christmas spirit and really enjoyed themselves. On Christmas morning they all got presents. Mr. and Mrs. Weasley even gave Hermione and Harry gifts. The last day of break approached, and they had to get ready to go back to Hogwarts. Harry held Hedwig as Ron took one of his posters off the wall. Ron took the rest of the bags of drugs out of the hole in the wall and then put them on his bed. He put the poster back up and walked towards the bags. He stared at them before tossing them in the garbage. They finished packing their trunks and got into the RV to go to the train station. They said goodbye to the Weasleys and got on the train. They waved as the train pulled out of the station. They left the city of London and were surrounded by forestry. Hermione stood up. "I'm going to the candy car." Harry looked up at her. "Just don't rob it." Hermione shook her head and left. "Why would she rob the candy car?" Ginny asked. "Because she once did rob the candy car," Ron answered, "on the first day of our first year. Now she's on eternal probation," Harry added. "Really?" "Yep. Then she fixed my glasses." Harry took them off to show her, and then put them back on. Ginny kept looking at his glasses. "You've had those same glasses since then? Shouldn't you be needing a new prescription by now?" That would explain why he occasionally bumps into walls. I just thought he was using some of my drugs, Ron said. I assure you, citizens, with these vision goggles my eyes are perfect, he said while talking to a trash can. Is there an eye doctor at Hogwarts? Ginny asked. Hopefully, Ron replied. They all thought to themselves and waited for Hermione. She returned with some chocolate for everyone and started to hand it out. Don't worry, I purchased this with money. But where did you get the money? Harry challenged. From the cash register of the candy car? Hermione rolled her eyes and smiled. Ginny shifted in her seat. What do your parents do for a living? Hermione coughed as if being caught off guard. They're dentists. Yeah, Ron cheered. Dentists have that gas. Love that stuff. Can you steal me some? Steal? I don't steal things. Stop, Mud. Try as you might, but you can't hide your life of crime. We know you robbed the candy car. Attempted to, Hermione corrected. Try using the word allegedly, Ron suggested. Always helps me in the courts. The cold winter ended and spring came again. Often the students in Wand's safety chattered amongst themselves as they waited for their professor to arrive. They would sit for the entire class since Lockhart didn't feel like showing up. They would occasionally see him before class and then again after with a new bruise or three. Noticing this happened almost every Friday, Harry decided to investigate. With Ron and Hermione, they snuck out of class. Well, they walked out of class since there wasn't a teacher there. They went to the parking lot and found the golden platform that Lockhart parked on. Today, the only thing parked on it was a puddle of oil. A trail led off the platform and onto the grass. Though the oil was difficult to see, there were tire tracks. Harry couldn't believe his eyes. Following Lockhart was going to be easy. They called a cab and followed the sad flattened grass. Soon they reached a new parking lot. This one was full of old, some might say classic, cars. The 3 Hogwarts students began walking around. It was definitely a car show. Not only were there cars, but there were many booths selling food, t-shirts, posters, and the like. They passed 3 booths that particularly stood out to them. In the middle was a chili dog booth, and on either side was a Dumb's Heartburn control booth. Then a Crimson Cross trailer came into view. Outside was a table of defibrillators and several blood pressure machines. A pretty woman passed by them, but not before telling them what she was doing there. I'm looking for a sugar daddy. How nice, Hermione replied with a creeped-out expression. Finally, they stumbled upon a car they recognized. Only when they got closer could they see the full extent of the calamity. The puke-green Pinto had its usual sun reflector on the windshield, but from this distance they could see so much more. The front of the car was missing the Ford emblem and instead sported a Ferrari one. They could see Lockhart had tried to draw it on, but the ink in the ballpoint pen he had used faded and run. He most likely walked into an auto parts store and splurged on a real one, but he didn't remove the scrap of paper he was replacing. On the back of the car was the same scenario, but instead of drawing an emblem, Lockhart printed one out of cardstock, and instead of a Ferrari emblem, it was a Corvette one. All emblems were duct-taped on, even though the tape partially covered them. He was missing a bumper, a taillight was smashed, and he had a bobblehead of himself on the tip of the radio antenna. None of the seat covers fit since the driver's seat had a Rolls-Royce seat cover and the passenger's seat had a Lamborghini seat cover. The back seat had covers that really didn't fit. The Jaguar seat covers were just sort of placed on top. The seats weren't the only things with covers because the steering wheel outfitted a squishy sponge cover. It looked to be originally yellow, but the filth and wear left it looking brown in most areas. On the dashboard, hanging above the Hula Girl bobblehead, was a set of fuzzy dice. Not far away did they spot Lockhart. They moved closer and listened to him speak to several people as if he was the host of a fancy dinner party. How quaint! What a cute Ferrari! He patted the hood of the shiny red car, causing the owner to rush over with a cloth and start wiping off the smudges. Lockhart, however, continued to speak to him and everyone else. Today, his reoccurring French accent was non-existent. Mine is a bit older, much better in my opinion, which of course is the correct opinion to have. A tall man snorted. You've got a big head, you know that? Why, thank you, Lockhart replied. Mother says it's because of my massive brain. I mean, it's huge. Your brains are raisins compared to mine. Maybe this lot would be specks of... No, atoms. No, the molecules inside of atoms. Oui? Oh hey, his accent's coming back. An extremely fat man casually cracked his knuckles. I'd give you 300,000 pounds if you would get that death trap off the road. Lockhart laughed. Nonsense! How would I get 300,000 pounds home? That's heavy. Perhaps you meant grams? Lockhart spun around, showing off his cape. In any case, jealousy isn't a very mature way to be. And then he seemed to be transported away from the group he was talking to. For a moment he was staring at his own car, which was quite a ways away. He began to speak quietly. My car is a flying snail. Ah, 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 ah. He was snapped back to reality and noticed a bald man in the group. My, that is a wonderful wig! I love the bald spot, perfect for someone in your class. The angered, balding man didn't faze him as he moved on to a completely bald man. Oh, there's the way to go, when you can't possibly pull off the comb-over anymore, though I'm positive you very much tried these past 20 years. Shave it all off. Pity you have such an ugly, misshapen head. The bald man took a step forward, fists clenched, but Lockhart didn't notice. He instead glanced at the car next to him and addressed the fat person who was closest to it. This must be your car. I can't imagine you literally could have walked very far from it. But good for you. What is it, 3 whole steps? He patted the head of the fat man. The group was slowly closing in, but Lockhart went on. My word, he exclaimed to another fat man. Your pants are so large. You must have gotten them from the big and tall shop. He turned to the short man who was close by and lowered his voice. Although it's not so much the tall shop as it is the big shop. He laughed and elbowed the man before turning back to the rest of the group. I suppose that's why you love it so much. I would shop there too if I was your gargantuan size. And if I didn't have wealth to afford my own personal tailor. Will's his name. Old good Will always knows what I need. A couple paces away was a food truck that caught Lockhart's eye. Look at that! Food from a truck! That way it can drive to people who can't walk. That's lovely business strategy right there. He approached the truck, but not to buy anything. Someone was looking at the menu and he decided they needed help. May I assist you in reading that? Obviously, you haven't been able to pass the 2nd grade and are incapable of reading. No offense, of course. I'm sure you tried very hard. I try my best to help the underprivileged, IQ-less, intelligence-deficient population. I'm sure none of you watch Mick and Rorty, and you have to have a high IQ, to appreciate the subtleties of the program. Oh, my mistake. I can tell vocabulary is not your strong suit. Not that you ever wear suits, or even know what one is. I'll try a simpler word. Unobviousities. It's so hard talking to commoners when you're at the very top of the bell curve. The group had followed him, and they were now surrounding him on all sides, slowly coming closer. Gents, I say, you're getting quite angry. That's not good for blood pressure, and I can see you struggle with that so much already. Watching this unfold, they finally understood why Lockhart kept returning to Hogwarts with bruises. Not this time. Harry needs to help him. Thinking fast, Harry hopped on a nearby mobility scooter. He drove towards Lockhart while pointing in the opposite direction and yelling, Hey! There's a bikini model in a Porsche! The group surrounding Lockhart snapped their heads in the direction Harry was pointing. With this distraction, Harry grabbed Lockhart and shoved him into the basket of the scooter. Once they were out of sight, Harry stopped the mobility scooter. You're safe now, citizen! Why do you do these things? Hermione asked as she and Ron walked towards the hiding spot. Well, I have to attempt to educate the commoners. Give it the old college try. Not that any of them do. I think most of them are afraid of even the word college. You are the thickest person ever, Ron stated. How are you not dead? How often do you go to these things? Lockhart smiled uncomfortably. Once I recover. He glanced back at the car show. However, this is the first time I have seen such an angry response to my constructive criticism. Usually only one ruffian approaches moi. This aggressive lot of people is making everyone who likes cars look bad, Hermione said. Though really, who could blame them for wanting to beat up Lockhart? He didn't hear her, or he pretended not to. Lockhart was prepared to go back in to get his car back, but Harry, Ron, and Hermione convinced him to call a cab, which led him to ask how they were getting back, and that led to Lockhart joining them in their trip back to Hogwarts. That was annoying. They arrived at the magic school and the cab drove off. Then they crossed the moat and passed by Hagrid's cabin. Hagrid stopped watering his flowers when he saw them. You escaped? We left, Harry responded. You're not supposed to escape. We'll have to reinforce the barriers of... His voice trailed off and he resumed his plant feeding. This event didn't stop Lockhart from returning to those car shows. Just as the car returned to its spray-painted pedestal, made of asphalt just to spite him courtesy of Snape's suggestion and a secret staff and student vote, so did his black eyes and bruises. Shaking the matter out of their minds, they returned to their blissful, free of Lockhart lives. Still, one issue plagued some of them. This issue was subtly seeded as the train left King's Cross Station on their very first day of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. What started with one troubled student spread to a second. Through the weeks at Hogwarts, Ginny became more frustrated at the school. After classes one day, they returned to the Gryffindor common room and everyone sat down except Ginny. Instead, she paced around the fireplace. I don't understand why we're sent here. It's not like we're even real wizards. How could we be wizards, though? We've never done any magic. Charlie graduated Hogwarts, now he's a zookeeper. He's not a wizard. She sank into a chair and sighed. Is any of this real? I feel like we're just being tricked. We're not even graded. Why? Why would we go to Hogwarts, a school of witchcraft and wizardry, if we weren't going to learn magic? Of course magic is real, Ron assured. Look! He took out his wand and started waving it around the room. Abracadabra. See? Magic. Hermione closed her book and watched Ginny. I can answer your question. Magic isn't real. None of us are wizards. Hagrid lied to us. Probably to get money. I know, that's what you say, but you really honestly think that? Yes, I'm sorry. Mud just doesn't like being a mudblood. She's definitely a wizard. I've seen her magic with my own 2 eyes. Ginny was reminded of his glasses. It's true then. Magic isn't real. You want to go beat up Hagrid? Hermione asked. Could we? Ginny responded. Come on, Hermione beamed. They began walking to the common room door. Sometimes it's 1 door, sometimes it's 2. It's weird. Harry and Ron followed them to make sure they didn't try to hurt Hagrid. They arrived at his cabin and knocked on the wooden door. The door swung open and Hagrid saw Hermione's angry glare. You know, when most people come to my house, they're not this angry. He invited them inside anyway and sat down. He picked up a baby duck that was wrapped in a blanket and started feeding it with a dropper. Ginny, Harry, and Ron sat on the couch with Fang while Hermione began to yell. Hagrid, apologize to Ginny for making her believe she's a wizard or suffer the consequences. Hagrid calmly looked up from the duck. She doesn't think she's a wizard anymore? She told me the truth about Hogwarts and how no one is a wizard, Ginny answered. This is a cruel thing to do to people. So you don't believe in wizardry anymore, Hagrid said. But I'm sure you'd like to stay with your brothers. This is an epidemic, Harry shouted. First Mud doesn't believe she's a wizard, and now Ginny. Magic is real. Ron and I still believe in wizardry. Harry looked at Ron, who was staring at his wand, seemingly questioning magic as well. Ginny composed herself and looked up at Hagrid. If Hogwarts is tricking me and these classes are meaningless wastes of time, then I would like to go home. She stood up, confident in her decision. And that was that. Despite many objections, the next morning Ginny was outside waiting for the car that would take her home. Her packed trunk was on the ground at her feet. Harry, Ron, and Hermione joined her in her last minutes at Hogwarts. While Ron's mind worried about Ginny, Harry's mind worried about the fate of the wizarding world. During this trying time, Harry started ranting to Hermione about the Muggle epidemic. Ron approached his sister, and she glanced at the bag in his hand. He caught her stare. I thought you of all people would understand. It's not an excuse. She noisily opened her trunk and took out the bag of drugs he had given her on the first day. She accentuated the bag and then crushed it into the dirt with her shoe. Seconds later, the car arrived. After goodbyes and waves were exchanged, she climbed in with her trunk and the car drove off. It was a particular blow to Harry that Ginny specifically had stopped believing in wizardry. She wasn't a nameless git he saw in the hallway. He had grown quite fond of her in the few months she'd spent at the castle. And now she'll never learn how to be a powerful wizard. He can't let this happen to Ron or Mud. Hermione already thinks magic isn't real. He has to stop this immediately. They walked back to the castle, and Harry started running through the halls. Muggledemic! Muggledemic! You are all wizards! Do not listen to Mud! Muggledemic! Harry screamed. This became a regular thing. Every day he got up early and ran around Gryffindor Tower screaming about the Muggle epidemic. During lunch, he would run around the cafeteria reminding everyone that they're wizards. During classes, he would pass inspirational wizard messages. After classes, he would start running again. He ran down every hall and warned every student. Hermione and Ron chased after him the first couple times, but then gave up and tried to avoid him while he warned people.